In our previous episode, we hit the NOS and zoomed our way into the bombastic, action-packed, and star-studded Fast and Furious franchise. We discussed everything from the series' most iconic characters to the best cars and best moments of the first 4 films. And today we are back at it with our deep dive into all 11 installments as we cover movies 5 through 10 and briefly get into the one and only Fast Saga spin-off movie, for now, Hobbs and Shaw. Of course, if you're not caught up on this ongoing, increasingly tangled web of movies, we recommend that you check out our first video on the Fast Saga before getting into this one. And of course, spoilers for the latest installment, Fast X, are coming up ahead, so if you don't want to know all the sweaty, high-octane details, then I don't know, go see the movie. But for now, fasten your seatbelts and crack open a cold Corona, because we are about to continue our journey into what the f you need to know about the Fast Saga.
That's going to take a while.
Then you better get started.
Now, usually we'd have a grand preamble where I discuss how iconic the franchise is, but of course we did all of that in our last episode. But what I will say is that the second half of the Fast Saga is much more extreme, unhinged, gravity-defying.
So now we got cars flying in the air on some 007 type shit?
See, the Fast Saga started with a grounded LA crime drama very much inspired by Point Break. But as the saga continues, the films have gone beyond undercover LAPD officers and stolen DVD players, and taken the franchise into a more action, espionage, anything goes but nobody dies type thing. And while I personally prefer the first half of this franchise, this second half isn't without its hits. And of course, stick around to the end of the video where we give you our definitive guide on which movies in the series are worth watching and which ones you can probably skip. So let's take it a quarter mile at a time and start with Fast 5. So, Fast 5 picks up immediately after the ending of the previous movie. With Dom now escaped from prison with his crew, they retreat off the grid to help an old friend, Vince from the first film, with a truck heist. The only problem is that the stuff they stole belongs to the DEA, and this is where Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson enters the franchise.
Stay the fuck out of my way.
So this movie is maybe the last truly great Fast and Furious movie in my opinion. It's also the foundation for where the franchise is set to conclude in the next few movies. So after being robbed, Hobbs, The Rock, is determined to find the Fast family and get the goods back. As it turns out, the information they stole can be used to incriminate Reyes, a high-powered drug lord who's about to meet his maker.
Then we're gonna need a team.
I love this movie's vibe being more grounded once again, but then including big and bombastic moments like the incredible vault heist scene. With Hobbs eventually catching up to Toretto, he's forced to help the team steal Reyes' vault and all of his money before Reyes can get to the crew first. See, this movie was before the franchise completely went off the rails. It has its larger-than-life moments, to be sure, but it balances out with a gritty revenge heist story to make up for one of the best installments in the entire series. Also, Mia finds out that she's pregnant with Brian's child, and the couple plan to use the stolen vault money to bring down Reyes and retire for good as a family. But let's face it, it's never really that simple for this ragtag group. The final showdown on the highway is also a wonderful spectacle. There's all the explosions and speeding cars that you want, and we see Hobbs finally face off with Reyes and unalive him in the process.
Help me. It's for my team, you son of a bitch.
And the ending sets up all the events for the latest movie, Fast X, but we'll get into that in due time. Hobbs tells Dom that he'll give the crew a 24-hour head start to get back on the run and avoid being arrested. The crew is once again completely rogue and on their own, but we know they can handle themselves by now, don't we? Making a big time jump for the next movie, Furious 6 begins about 4 years after the events of the last one. We see that Dom is, well, you guessed it, living in a random country hiding out from the police. Hobbs tracks Dom down and tells him a shocking truth. And Redcon alert, Letty is still alive. And Hobbs, of course, needs Dom's help to track her down.
See, he's gonna come voluntarily. As a matter of fact, he's gonna beg me.
And why would Dom want to help Hobbs? Well, you guessed it again. Hobbs offers to clear Dom's record in exchange for his help. These movies are officially becoming formulaic.
You keep running your pie hole, you're gonna smell an ass kicking.
Letty is working for a man named Owen Shaw, who for all intents and purposes is a terrorist. Letty is also suffering from amnesia, so she conveniently doesn't remember Dom or her relationship with the crew. Sounds like they got their work cut out for them, right? Dom and the crew track down Shaw and Letty and make an attempt to capture them. The attempt fails and Letty shoots Dom in the shoulder. And I mean, talk about a toxic relationship, right boys?
Man, when a woman starts shooting at you, that's a clear sign to back the fuck off.
This movie is definitely where we really start to see the franchise slip out of the real world and into the world of hyper-reality, which adds all kinds of entertainment, but also begins to chip away at each movie's emotional weight.
We're gonna have to dig deeper than that.
If there was a definitive starting point where the movies begin to blend out of crime drama and into dumb fun, it's this movie. The stunts are big and more dangerous, the performances are more hardened and less complex, and of course, Dominic Toretto is becoming f***ing Superman at this point.
He's an amazing guy.
Eventually, the team does capture Shaw, and we learn that Hobbs' partner Riley is actually a mole for Shaw, and she helps him escape and enter the iconic airport jetway chase.
Now we got a big ass plane to deal with.
That ain't a plane, that's a planet.
This final battle sort of undoes Letty's memory loss, and she's basically just back into her usual badass self and helps out the team. Dom kicks Owen out of a moving airplane, which somehow doesn't kill him. And of course, our family makes away with the sweet victory of a job well driven. I don't love this movie, but I do enjoy seeing the crew they assembled, and of course, who could forget the massive action sequences and sheer scope of this movie. Alright, so the timeline gets a little jumbled with this next one. This movie actually takes place immediately after the events of Tokyo Drift, which technically takes place in 2014 and is sandwiched between movies 6 and 7. We're in for more retcons in this movie as we learn that Han's death, which was supposedly brought on by the Yakuza in Tokyo Drift, was actually Deckard Shaw, played by Jason Statham, who's Owen's brother and is now out for revenge for what the crew did to him. Shaw burns down Dom's house and severely injures Hobbs, and he's just getting started.
Kind of a unique asset that no government would ever admit to employing.
Meanwhile, a government operative named Mr. Nobody, played by Kurt Russell, hires the crew for their unique skill set and needs them to locate and rescue a hacker named Ramsey. Ramsey is the creator of a program called
God's Eye,
which has the power to hack any device with a camera from anywhere in the world. While the crew hunts for Ramsey, Shaw is on their tail and has no plans to let them escape, and the crew is able to save Ramsey from the captors, but then Shaw takes possession of GoldenEye, which leads to the most ridiculous battle that fans could have imagined. So Dom is basically full Captain America at this point, man. And that means that we're officially in the absurd territory of these movies.
The street always wins.
Also, Brian and Mia officially retire, and this of course was a plot point written into the end to keep Paul Walker's character in the story after the tragic and untimely death of the actor. R.I.P. Paul, we love you. Okay, I'm gonna give you one guess as to where this movie starts. Ready? Dom and Letty are living off the grid.
No way. Yeah.
Look, I know in real life there can be years between movies, and this is a perfectly normal way to start. But when you're binge watching the series back to back to back, it gets to be incredibly redundant seeing Dom in a South American country trying to act like he's not about to jump straight back into his white tank top and kick some evil spy ass.
You lost the minute you interrupted my honeymoon.
Also, remember Elena from some of the previous movies? You know, Dom's side piece from when Letty was supposedly dead? Well, a hacker named Cypher, played by Charlize Theron, shows up and says that she needs Dom's help. Cypher is known for her ability to get people to do her bidding by way of blackmail, and it's no different this time. So Cypher has kidnapped Elena and her son, and Dom knows he needs to help her in order to save Elena's life and the life of her child, which we learn is potentially Dom's.
Whatever happens, just save our son.
This movie is wild. Dom decides he's gonna work for Cypher, and he seemingly goes full dark, like Bizarro Dom. He's no longer the loyal family man that we expect him to be, but rather a super brute who acts as Cypher's errand boy.
Dominic Toretto just went rogue.
Mr. Nobody is back, and he needs Dom neutralized immediately, so he hires Letty, Tej, Roman, Ramsey, Hobbs, and Shaw to track down Dom and bring him down. This movie plays with an interesting concept by bringing into question what it may look like if Dom wanted to be evil, and I must say, I don't like it.
Letty, I don't like telling you this one bit. The game's changed.
This movie is fine, and it can be a lot of fun if you're into the saga, but for me, this one is just too much. It's like they expect you to forget that the whole thing started with an undercover cop trying to bust some street racers. Luckily for us, Dom wasn't really turning his back on the family. Duh. Our boy would never do such a thing, so instead, Dom has been secretly working in the shadows to double-cross Cypher and save Elena and her son in the process. This reveal could have been seen a mile away, and only because Dom's transition from normal Toretto to dark Toretto doesn't really get any development. He's just good one day and bad the next. And Dom unfortunately can't save Elena, and she dies leaving behind her son, Dom's son. And Hobbs quits the force, but not the franchise. Yet.
They call me a god. They call me a god.
Okay, let's try something different. You tell me if there's a multi-year time jump at the beginning of this movie. Go ahead, tell me. Now listen, I don't actually mind the movies jumping forward in time, I just think it's crazy how many times in a row I've had to say this. Anyway, it's been 2 years since the last movie's ending, and Dom, Letty, and their son Brian are, okay, I'm just gonna f***ing say it, living off the grid. And as if we weren't experiencing enough deja vu, some old friends show up to ask for Dom's help. The crew tells Dom that Mr. Nobody has been attacked and Cypher has been kidnapped. And why would Dom care? Well, as it turns out, his long-lost brother Jacob, played by John Cena, may be involved. Now, at this point in the franchise, I don't expect an incredible and complex story. I don't get my hopes up for the pulse-pounding yet meaningful action of the original movie, and after this many times, I don't even expect to believe the physics of the world they inhabit. And with all of that being said, I still don't like this movie. This is really the movie where it becomes clear that nobody that dies is ever really dead. Nobody that quits is ever really walking away, and for God's sake, how many times are we gonna be lied to about what happens to Han?
Mr. Nobody had a way of making things look real.
The plot, as usual, is the same as always, but this time, Dom learns a little something about his past that changes a few things in the canon. See, in the first film, Dom explains to Brian that his dad had died in a race when Dom was a teenager, and Dom blamed his father's mechanic and even beat him nearly to death, which sent Dom to prison. In this movie, we find out from Jacob that it didn't exactly happen like that. It turns out their dad told Jacob to rig the car to fail so that they could collect on the insurance. The movie then proceeds to throw all realism straight out the window when Tej and Roman are planning to fly a car into space. Nope, yep, you heard that right, folks. They drive an automobile into space.
We are headed to outer space. You acting like we on our way to Home Depot.
Listen, when the idea of covering all of these movies was presented to me, I had reservations. I had already seen the first half of the franchise, but was completely unaware of anything in the second half. It was described to me as, quote, dumb fun. And during the first 8 movies, I couldn't really argue. But F9, this movie right here is too goddamn dumb to be dumb fun.
Who pre-planned an aerial jump and landed at the bottom of an airplane? Who does that?
This movie, to me, felt like a huge swing to drive the franchise into the superhero genre over the action thriller genre. Between the ridiculous car chases and the soap opera dialogue and plot, the movie was clearly a case of style over substance gone way too far. Oh, and you guessed it, Jacob ends up having to team up with the family to beat the real bad guys at the end. What are the odds of that?
And we just got bigger.
With this movie letting me down slightly, I was not excited for this next installment. I wasn't even sure if I could really get back to caring about these characters the way I did in the beginning of the franchise. And was I right? Fast X is the latest installment of the franchise at the time of this recording, and I gotta say, it wasn't bad. This movie didn't do what we originally hoped for, which was fall closer to the more grounded and heartfelt style of the first one, but it also didn't do what I was afraid of and bore me while also ruining my favorite characters. Instead, the movie did what the Fast Saga does best and blew the lid off the place with the most bizarre action it can produce. Now, listen, I didn't love it, but I was never going to love it. I think my favorites of this franchise have already come and passed, but this movie did deliver on a few things that made the experience feel more alive. Like, for one, I have to talk about Jason Momoa. Momoa plays Dante Reyes, the son of the rich prick that Hobbs shoots at the end of the fifth movie. He's got a bit of a Baron Zemo thing going on where he's been plotting his elaborate revenge for years and waiting for the right time to make the crew pay for what they've done. But he's also fun as hell to watch in this movie. Jason Momoa is a bit of a character on and off the screen, as we know, but in this movie, his character is downright savage. The guy is a complete psychopath, and for my money, it doesn't get much better than seeing Jason Momoa being this completely flamboyant and larger-than-life villain against Dom's straight-faced, straight man scowl. Oh, and John Cena is back as Jacob, who is now just Dom's BFF. And while the dynamic is much better this way, it was weird that their whole relationship is 100% opposite now than it was just in the previous movie. Jacob is like the cool uncle to Little B, who is also learning to drive at the age of, like, 9. Honestly, this is kind of a sweet moment in the movie. And I don't want to spoil the movie here, as it's still relatively new at the time we're making this video. But there are some deaths that are sad to see, but to be completely honest, I don't think anyone will actually be dead in the next one. It seems that the franchise, if nothing else, has fully embraced its place as a franchise not to be taken too seriously. Also, there's a Hobbs and Shaw spin-off that leans even further into the superhero genre, with Idris Elba playing some kind of super soldier with nanotech or something.
I'm Black Superman.
You're crazy.
The movie is genuinely kind of fun at some points, but it's really just a buddy cop movie dressed in action set pieces and CGI explosions. But if you love The Rock, and I do, and if you love Jason Statham, which I also do, and if you want to see Idris Elba being a menacing badass, then come on, we all do, then this movie may be for you. And with all of that being said, we are at the end, for now, of this incredibly successful and long-lasting film series. And as promised, here's our picks for the movies that we consider to be essential viewing, and here are the ones that you can probably skip. I think there's certainly more standout films in the first half of the franchise, but I also must say that the second half had some pretty fun moments as well. And as always, if you're interested in watching these movies yourself to form your own opinion, then good luck and make sure your seatbelt is securely fastened.
You'd be doing yourself a favor there.
And that, mi familia, is what the f*** you need to know about the Fast Saga.